Hi, and welcome back. Well, last week we talked about boho design, and you spoke, I listened. That was a very, very popular video. So you're making it very clear to me that this is the sort of thing you are interested in. So let's take a closer look at 21st century design trends. What is emerging currently? What are we in the midst of? And as part of doing that, we are going to move backwards. I had thought about moving forward because we're used to that chronological order. You start at the earliest, move to the latest, but that's not helpful for a lot of us. Um, we know the design style we are living in right now. We look around, we look at our own homes, we look at our friends' homes, we see magazines, we go to furniture stores. We know where we are, and this is where our aesthetic is grounded. So I thought it would be more productive if we started from where we are familiar and comfortable, and then moved backwards so that we're starting from a point of security, sound footing, and then going back and taking a look at how we got here. So stay tuned. We're going to get right into it. Okay, 21st century design has a great deal in, in common with late 20th century design, which is, as one would expect, gradual transitions. We have not seen any really abrupt changes, but there have been some. Boho is one of them. Now, when we talked about boho, it's acceptable now. It's becoming trendy and chic, but it wasn't that way 20 years ago, even though, as we all know, it existed. 20 years ago, it was crazy grandma. 30 years ago, it was crazy great grandma, and so on. People have always had wildly eclectic environments, and they've enjoyed them. Their guests have enjoyed them, but it didn't have popular acceptance. And now boho does have popular acceptance. Is it mainstream? No, not by a long shot. But is it accepted? Yes. So that is one of the departures. There are a couple of other departures from late 20th century. Industrial is one of them. Now, industrial is something I'm simply going to mention. I'm not going to show pictures. We all know what it is. It's a style that exists more in decorator magazines and very expensive New York lofts than actually exists in our own homes. Because, let's face it, very few of us want a stainless steel countertop where every smudge and fingerprint has to be buffed out, or open restaurant shelving where all of your pots and pans. I don't know anyone who keeps their kitchen clean enough to tolerate that, for one thing. And I really don't know anyone who is quite so in love with iron. Um, yeah, industrial is interesting to look at, but it's not mainstream decorating. And I wouldn't go so far as to call it a fad. Oh, maybe I would. Okay, it's a fad. It's not something that I believe is going to hold up. Steampunk, which is very closely related to industrial, who knows where that's going to go? Um, I enjoy it, but that sort of fantasy industrial, is that going to hold up? I very much doubt it. I don't even think it's ever going to become truly mainstream. So there are some trends that are real departures from the 80s and 90s. But are they going to mainstream out? I doubt it very much. So we're going to stick with mainstream. So the first thing I want to do is show you some pictures of early 20th century design, or early 21st. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Early 21st century design. And this is from 2000 to roughly 2020. This is what we're getting into. So the first 20 years of this century. Okay, when you take a look at this, I want you to be observant. Try to see if you spot what I spotted. Okay, take a look. Did you spot it? One of the things I noticed in those pictures, and mind you, I did not cherry pick those pictures. I chose pictures that were representative, but not, I didn't choose them based on certain features or anything like that, just general representative designs. Did you notice the lack of window treatments? Fewer than half of the windows had anything on them at all. Um, one one room actually had nothing on the windows but drapes dividing the rooms, drapes instead of doors. Others had window curtains that were extremely plain, pulled way back. Heavy drapery treatments are gone. And the thing is, I've lived through this for the past 20 years, and I didn't notice until I noticed. And then it was like, wow, no kidding. That seems to be one of the most significant decorating trends to come out in the 21st century. The valances and the draperies and the undercurtains and the shades and do you remember that back in the 80s and 90s when you would have to go out to a design shop to have your curtains and draperies made because there were trims and there were tassels and oh my goodness, it was just, I mean, it was like a Victorian harlot all done up for business. Disappeared. Now we are into light coming in open, unshuttered, unfettered windows. Wow, I hadn't noticed that until I noticed it. This, the images that you saw had another thing that struck me. And again, I wonder if you noticed. A lot of them really looked very retro. I would look at that and say, wow, there's a 50s feel to at least half those rooms. Um, certain 50s colors, the chairs, it was just, it was almost as if they were trying to draw elements of 50s design into those rooms. Now, I don't know if they were. What I can tell you is that was typical of all of the images, and I chose, I believe I have 10 images in that little film clip. I chose those images from more than 200 images. And those images come from current decorating magazines, decorating websites. That is 21st century design. The same. Those retro touches. And it's, I don't know what that means. I look at it, I see it. But as I said before, when you are in the middle of a period, you don't know. You are not the ones who will be making the decisions about this. It's your children who will be making the decisions. We look at this, we see it, we understand it. But someone else in a future generation is going to look back and categorize this. And I'm starting to think they are going to look at this as early 21st century retro, because that's what it strikes me as. Oh, early first century, or early first 21st century retro with no curtains. So, I don't know. Let's see. There are a couple of other things that I didn't notice so much in these particular pictures, but I've noticed independently. Let me show you the first one. Okay. Sectionals. Sectional seating, sectional sofas were a huge thing in the late 60s and early 70s. Everything was sectional this, sectional that. But the sectionals of the early 21st century are different. They have an elongated sort of daybed coming out of the side of a sofa. It's a very sort of unique style. And it's a style that, with very, very few exceptions, I've not seen before. I've seen some Art Deco furniture that had features like that, but that's very rare. It was not characteristic of Art Deco. It was just a few pieces, once in a while, every now and then, you'd see something like that, a sort of daybed pulling out of a sofa. That is an early 21st century piece of furniture that, for most intents and purposes, did not exist in earlier times. I suspect that it emerged on the scene as a response to more casual living, that people go in and don't just sit on the sofa. They lounge on the sofa. They sleep on the sofa. I don't know what maybe they don't have beds. I don't know. But certainly there's something about that is appealing to modern lifestyles. And it could be just, couples in which both mom and dad work. They come home, they're tired. I'm going to go sleep on the sofa. I don't have an explanation for it yet. I'll get one. But that is something that is uniquely 21st century. And there is another design theme that emerged in the 21st century. And that one is a country. We call it country. Designers are completely out of touch with this one. They call it rustic, and that's as close as you can come, because this style is not haute design. Our word for the day, haute, French, means high. That's all, just high. So when you speak of haute cuisine, you're talking about the top layers of cuisine, the cream of the crop, the upper echelon. So rustic country, not haute design. But this is how people live. And even when you go to like country living magazines, you're not seeing this. Or if you are seeing it, you're seeing a decorator's representation of it, and they just don't have a handle on it. So let me show you Decorator Rustic. Okay. If you've noticed for most of those pictures, what the design relies on is the structure. It's the building, the house that it's in, the massive stone walls and the beams and the wood and whatever, and not the furniture. Now, I did cherry pick those photos because I went through all of the design rustic country living sort of things and tried to choose the designs that most reflected what you and I see in our homes, maybe our friends' homes, what it is that is legitimately out there, as opposed to what it is a decorator thinks it ought to be. And there is a disconnect, a major disconnect. Most decorators do not like what we would call country decorating. They just find it lowbrow. It doesn't appeal to them, and they're not responding to it. But the average American is, at least some of them are. I know I can think of at least 3 of my friends who have beautiful homes decorated in what they call the country style, but what I would call rustic. And these homes, all right, fine, Maybe they are lowbrow, but they are just as open and hospitable and unpretentious as the people who live in them. They're wonderful places, and they're owned and decorated by wonderful people. They're real. And that's something that has really taken off in the 21st century. Now, we've had iterations of this before. Um, in the 60s, it was called early American, sometimes colonial. Um, but it doesn't quite catch it, because in the 60s, what they called early American was ersatz early American. It had nothing to do with early American furniture. It was just some designer's version of what early American furniture might have looked like if, in fact, they had lazy boy recliners. Frankly, that stuff was a mess. And I, yes, the less said about that, the better. But we will get into that when we talk about design styles in the 60s, because the 60s was a hot mess, period. You can't whitewash that. It was just an utter disaster in terms of interior decor. But when we look at rustic design, the elements we are seeing are darker colors, dark blue, navy, dark reds like maroons, even, hunter greens, purples, dark colors. We see a lot of plaids. We see interesting materials, materials that are not considered haute. Let's use that word again. Used in interesting ways. A burlap runner on a table, for example. Gingham curtains that were traditionally relegated to the kitchen. Now they're out in the living room, because it is a comfortable, unpretentious design style. A lot of natural wood, a lot of unfinished wood, wood with live edges, a pallet board. It is a legitimate design style, even if the decorators choose not to deal with it. And it can be very beautiful when it's well done. Now, it is not my style. That is something that personally, I would have a lot of difficulty living in a room like that, primarily because it's unpretentious. And as I look over at my coffee table, I see the rose medallion bowl and the foreign language art book. And that is virtually the definition of pretentious. In my defense, I will say, if you can read the foreign language book, it's really not pretentious. But be that as it may, I can certainly understand somebody walking in here, looking around, saying, boy, this place is pretentious. There's a lot of art in here. I get that. And there are a lot of people that are just plain turned off by that level of art and the antiques. And that's just, it's like they look at it and say, oh yeah, that's okay, but that's not how I live. You know how they live? They live in rustic environments, and they love it. And there's nothing wrong with that. The way I live is not better than the way they live. It's just better for me, just as the way they live is better for them. But that's a legitimate design style, but it's just not getting recognized. And I have a fundamental sort of bone to pick with that, because who are the decorators to be telling people that their sense of taste is trash? It's wrong. So that's what's coming out at this point in the early 21st century. Now, let's talk about some other things. Colors. The colors that are coming out are strongly favoring blue. I have no idea why. Strong blues. And everything from baby blue through peacock blue, slate blue. Blue just seems to be the hot color for the first 20 years of the 21st century. Now, blue is a very soothing color. That's something I will say for it. It's also effectively becoming a neutral. Now, there are an awful lot of things you can mix with blue, and I'm hard-pressed to think of anything you can't mix with blue as long as you use the right shades. Um, so I've got no argument with blue. But as you noticed from the images I've shown, it's still a very neutral palette. It's not strong color. The strong color is appearing in the boho. That's where the strong color is coming out. It could just be that the color lovers are gravitating toward boho and the non-color lovers are gravitating toward the more mainstream designs. I don't know, don't have an answer for this, but it's a trend that I'm noticing. Another trend I am noticing is in the 80s and 90s, when you saw an elegant coffee table, there was invariably something very large on it. There's an obelisk, a vase of flowers on the coffee table. Boy, that would not work around here. The cat would have a field day. But something tall, some sort of sculptural element in the middle of the coffee table. Now that seems to have been replaced by books. Although do keep in mind, when I pull down images, these are decorators' images. And decorators love to stick books on coffee tables. Interestingly enough, they don't like to stick bookcases in rooms. They seem to think a bookcase belongs in the library and nowhere else, because bookcases tend not to be part of their design, but they throw them on the coffee table. So decorators seem to have a love-hate relationship with books. It's as if you're not supposed to read them. They're supposed to be, objet d'art. They're decorators. I can't explain them. But that was one of the things that I noticed fairly quickly, that the tall obelisk, the sculpture on the coffee table is gone. That was ubiquitous in the 80s and 90s. It was a big thing on your coffee table. Nobody knew what it was. It had to be dusted. There was no reason to keep it there. You just did it because you saw it in a magazine, I guess. I don't know. A few other things in terms of decorating is more user-friendly beds. In the 80s and 90s, the perfect bed was a made-up creature with comforters and skirts and all the pillows and la, and it looked like it was about to get up and just jump at you. Now, we are away from bedspreads, but the trend is for a bed that looks like you are about to crawl into it and go to sleep. The fancy pillows are gone. Now it's just the sheets, the blanket or comforter, whatever, the pillows. That seems to be a new trend as well. And the bed in the 21st century is fully made once the little sheet is folded over the top of the blanket and the pillows are puffed up. No spreads, no gewgaws, no extra pillows. Very different. It's a departure from what had existed before. Also, again, much lighter in the bedrooms, much more open windows, lack of draperies. I don't know how people sleep in those bedrooms, but I guess they do. Whereas in the 80s and 90s, the bedrooms were usually relatively dark, presumably due to the practical consideration of needing to go into them and sleep. But it could take you 5 minutes to unmake your bed just so you could get into it and go to sleep. And, another 10 minutes in the morning to make it back up and pop up your pillows and whatever. The beds were a work of art in the 80s and 90s. Now they've gone back to a more sort of functional piece of furniture. But interestingly enough, the windows seem to be less functional because there doesn't seem to be much thought given to blocking out the light so that you can actually sleep, or so that, people don't go wandering up and peeking in your windows at night. I know. Why would that even enter my mind? in my community, this brief digression, but it's true. Apparently there was a peeping Tom wandering around, and the interesting thing was, apparently he was doing it for like 15, 20 years, never got caught. Who knows what's going on with that? So I actually have neighbors who are terrified of the thought of not pulling their shades down at night for fear that this peeping Tom is still around here. So he's certainly at this point retired. And I can say with certainty he's never been in my yard. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like the sense has come in some ways, and these open beds, unmade or made but not made, seems like a step in the right direction. But the lack of curtains, blinds, shades in the window seems like a step backwards, a step in the wrong direction. So I don't know. Time will tell. In terms of kitchen design, we all know what that is. And that is that huge mega island in the middle of the kitchen. That is something that I'm not going to say it has never been seen until the 21st century, but it was not a standard feature of kitchens until the 21st century. Now it's become standard. And kitchen design, that's granite countertops, marble quartz too, but granite's the big one. Sinks with aprons, that farmhouse sink, although that is now passing out of style. That was something that was popular between about maybe 1990 to about 2010. It's fading out now. Those farmhouse sinks, passe. Um, Brushed nickel hardware has replaced the ubiquitous brass. 80s and 90s, everything was brass. Brushed nickel now. Also bronze. A beautiful antique looking kitchen and door hardware. Just elaborate. That's coming in. There was a trend which did not catch on, and that was different cabinetry in the kitchens. So perhaps your lower cabinets would be mahogany, your upper cabinets would be painted white or green or something. It was intended to give a furniture or modular look to the kitchen. Never caught on. That was sort of a flash in the pan. It's something that we saw enter the picture and then just fade out just as quickly. So this is what we have in terms of early 21st century design. Hold that in your mind, because next time we talk about this, and I'm not sure when that's going to be, might be next week, might be tomorrow, we'll see. Next time we talk about this, we are going to talk about the furniture and decorating arts of the 1980s and 1990s. You're going to see a lot of common threads, but you're also going to see some remarkable differences. So I will see you later. You all have oh, I can't believe that. I was about to say goodbye without this. All right, because we got to do a giveaway. Now remember Karen Hopper, our jewelry reconstructionist. Take a look at this. There we go. This is a mirrored compact. It's two mirrors. One is a regular sized mirror. One is an enlarging mirror in a beautiful little case. And as you can see, let me see if I can get that to focus. There's a lovely little Victorian cabochon there. It's a beautiful little painted rose. And this was a piece that Karen obviously made with her repurposed jewelry. This is our next giveaway piece. Now, because some of you have expressed great reluctance to say, give me that compact, I will settle for, gee, I'd love to have that compact. Oh, Sue, that compact must come home with me. Gee, is there a compact giveaway? I'd like to participate. So anything you want. Just make sure the word compact is in it so I know this is what you want. All right, there we go now. And I will see you tomorrow.